The Kansas wind, usually a cheerful tune across the wide open plains, felt like a lonely sigh to Ada Price. It had been 6 long months since Thomas, her dear husband, had passed away. 6 months of quiet mornings and even quieter evenings on their ranch in 1881. Each sunrise brought a fresh wave of grief, but also a fierce spark of determination. Ada wasn't one to sit and weep forever. Thomas had left her with a good piece of land, a sturdy house, and a dream, a new barn. A big, strong barn that would hold their harvests and shelter their animals through the harsh winters. Ada walked out to the spot where Thomas had staked out the barn's foundation. The tall prairie grass swayed around her knees, whispering secrets only the wind seemed to understand. Her heart ached, a deep, hollow ache that no amount of busy work seemed to fill. But grief, she realized, could also be a kind of fuel. It could make a person stubborn, unyielding. And Ada Price was becoming very stubborn indeed. Neighbors, kind-hearted souls from miles around, had offered to help. Mrs. Henderson from a next farm over had brought a warm pie and tearful hugs, suggesting her sons could lend a hand with the heavy timbers. Mr. Peterson, a gruff but gentle man, had even ridden by, offering his team of horses to haul supplies. Each time, Ada had politely but firmly shaken her head. "No, thank you kindly," she'd say, her voice soft but unwavering. "I need to do this myself. It's important to me." She knew it sounded strange. Building a barn was a man's job, folks said, or at least a job for many hands. But Ada felt a deep, almost primal need to build this barn with her own 2 hands. It wasn't just wood and nails, it was a promise. A promise to Thomas, to their life together, and to herself that she could carry on, even alone. This barn would be a monument to their shared dream, built by her enduring strength. Ada was not a big woman, but she was wiry and strong from years of ranch life. Her hands, though calloused, were surprisingly nimble. She knew how to swing an axe, how to mend a fence, and how to ride a horse like the wind. But a barn? A whole barn, from the ground up? That was a different kind of challenge. She spent weeks just clearing the land, pulling up rocks, and digging out the stubborn roots of old bushes. Her muscles ached at the end of each day, but a strange kind of peace settled over her as she worked. Each shovelful of dirt, each rock rolled away, felt like she was clearing away a piece of her sadness, making room for something new to grow. The sun beat down on her, turning her skin a warm brown, and the dust coated her clothes. She didn't mind. She felt alive, even amidst her sorrow. The empty space where the barn would stand was now clear, a bare patch of earth waiting to be filled. Ada looked at it, a tiny smile playing on her lips. It was a big job, bigger than anything she had ever done alone. But she would do it. She had to. No help, no charity, just Ada and her will. With the land finally cleared, Ada felt a new energy buzz through her. The real work was about to begin. She had spent days poring over Thomas's old blueprints, simple drawings on yellowed paper, imagining each beam and board falling into place. Now, it was time to make those lines real. Her first task was to lay the foundation. She hauled heavy stones from a nearby creek bed, rolling them onto a makeshift sled she pulled with her strongest horse, Bess. It was slow, back-breaking work, but Ada gritted her teeth and pushed on. Each stone carefully placed, each layer of mortar spread, felt like a victory. Her hands, already rough from ranch work, grew even tougher, her muscles singing with effort. Next came the framing. This was where the barn would truly take shape. She learned to measure twice and cut once, just as Thomas used to say. She sawed through thick planks of wood, the sweet smell of pine filling the air. Lifting the long, heavy beams into place was a challenge. She used ropes and pulleys, rigging up simple machines that Thomas had taught her about, straining and grunting as she slowly, painstakingly, raised the uprights. Sweat dripped into her eyes, stinging, but she just wiped it away with the back of her hand and kept going. The first few walls began to rise, a skeleton against the vast Kansas sky. Ada felt a surge of pride each evening as she looked at her day's work. It was taking longer than she'd imagined, and her body was weary, but the barn was growing. Hammering nails was something she'd done countless times, but never so many, never for such a grand purpose. Each strike was firm and true, sending the steel deep into the wood. Asterisk thwack, thwack, thwack. Asterisk the sound echoed across the silent prairie, a rhythm of her own making. She felt a connection to every piece of wood, every nail. This wasn't just a barn, it was a part of her. Some parts of the building were easier. She could reach the lower boards with no trouble, nailing them into place with practiced ease. But as the walls grew taller, reaching the top became a struggle. She would stand on a wobbly crate, stretching her arm as high as it could go, trying to balance while driving in a nail overhead. Her back would ache from bending and reaching, and sometimes she'd miss, bending a nail or scraping her knuckles. "Blast it all," she'd mutter, shaking her hand. She needed to put up the next row of siding, but it was just out of comfortable reach. She tried standing on a stack of timbers, but it felt too unsteady. She was strong, yes, but not tall, and bending over backward to hammer nails into boards above her head was proving to be a real pain. She squinted up at the unfinished wall, a frown creasing her brow. This was the part where she wished she had Thomas's height, or at least another pair of hands. She could manage, she told herself. She always managed. But a little sigh escaped her lips as she looked at the growing height of her barn. Ada grumbled to herself, trying yet again to stretch her arm just a little bit higher. The hammer felt heavy, and the nail, balanced precariously between her fingers, seemed determined to escape her grasp. She was trying to attach a board near the top of the rising wall, a spot that was just out of her comfortable reach. Her back protested, and her shoulders burned. She let out a frustrated sigh, stepping down from the wobbly crate that served as her only ladder. Just then, a faint sound drifted on the wind. It was the rhythmic thud of a horse's hooves. Ada straightened up, wiping a bead of sweat from her brow with a dusty forearm. She squinted across the prairie. A rider was approaching, a small figure silhouetted against the bright afternoon sky. Her first thought was that it was another well-meaning neighbor, coming to offer help she didn't want. Her jaw tightened. She was grateful for their kindness, but her resolve to build this barn alone was stronger than ever. As the rider drew closer, Ada saw it wasn't anyone she recognized. This man was shorter than most, but he sat his horse with an easy confidence. He wasn't big, but he looked strong, like a gnarled oak tree. His hat was pulled low, shading his face, but she could see a glint in his eyes. He rode a sturdy pinto pony, and a large canvas bag, heavy with something, bounced against his saddle. The rider stopped a polite distance from the half-built barn, dismounting with a smooth motion. He pushed his hat back, revealing a face tanned by the sun and crinkled at the corners from smiling or perhaps squinting into the sun. He had a neatly trimmed mustache and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He was holding the canvas bag. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, his voice a friendly rumble. He had a slight, knowing smile that Ada immediately distrusted. It was the kind of smile that meant someone knew more than they were letting on. "Afternoon," Ada replied, her voice cool. She crossed her arms over her chest, ready to politely refuse whatever offer was about to come. "Name's Luke," he continued, taking a step closer. He gestured with his chin towards the barn. "Heard tell there was a woman building herself a barn out here. Didn't quite believe it until I saw it with my own eyes." Ada felt a flush creep up her neck. She didn't like being talked about, especially not like some kind of spectacle. "Well, you see it now," she said, a hint of sharpness in her tone. Luke just nodded, his gaze sweeping over the rising walls. He paused, his eyes lingering on the very spot Ada had just been struggling with. He saw the bent nail, the scraped wood, and the way she'd been looking at it. His smile, already present, seemed to grow a little wider, a little more stubborn. He held up the heavy canvas bag. "Came prepared," he said simply. "Got a whole mess of nails here. Figured you might be running low." Ada stared at the bag, then at Luke's unwavering, almost mischievous smile. He hadn't just ridden up, he'd ridden up with nails. And that look on his face, that stubborn, knowing look, told her he wasn't about to take no for an answer. She felt a flicker of annoyance, but also, surprisingly, a tiny spark of something else she couldn't quite name. Ada narrowed her eyes at Luke, the heavy bag of nails still clutched in his hand. "I appreciate the thought, Mr. Luke," she said, her voice firm, "but I'm doing this myself. I don't need charity." Luke's stubborn smile didn't falter. "Charity?" He chuckled, a low, easy sound. "Mom, imarankia. I know a thing or two about building. And I can see clear as day you're having a bit of a tussle with those high spots." He gestured again to the unfinished wall, where Ada had just been struggling. "My back's built for climbing, not bending over. You're trying to do a job meant for two, or at least one mighty tall fellow." Ada felt her cheeks grow warm. He was right, of course. She was struggling. But her pride, a sturdy wall built of grief and determination, stood tall. "I'll manage," she insisted, though a tiny part of her longed for the ease he was offering. Luke took another step closer, his eyes twinkling. "Manage, you will, I don't doubt it. But why make it harder? I'm not asking for pay. Just a chance to stretch my legs and put these nails to good use. Got a whole wagon full of them back in my place. Don't need 'em all." He paused, then added, "Besides, a barn needs to be built right, or it won't stand up to a Kansas storm. And those high nails are important." He had a point. A badly built barn was no good to anyone. Ada chewed on her lip, torn between her fierce independence and the practical truth of his words. She looked at Luke, truly looked at him. He wasn't trying to be bossy, just persistent, like a burr under a saddle. "I'm not looking for a partner," Ada said, trying one last time to push him away. Luke just shrugged, his smile softening a bit. "Didn't say you were. Just offering a bit of a lift, like helping a bird get to a high branch. You can do the important work on the ground, and I can just reach." He mimed, stretching his arm up high, his short, strong frame surprisingly agile. "I can get up there where you can't easily bend over. It's just simple sense." Ada sighed, a small puff of air that carried a hint of defeat, but also a sliver of relief. He wasn't offering to take over, just to do the parts that were truly difficult for her. And he was right. Her back was aching. Maybe, just maybe, a little help with the unreachable spots wouldn't be charity. It would be practical. She still didn't like it. Her resolve to do this alone was a shield against her sadness, a way to prove her own strength. But Luke's calm, stubborn manner was hard to argue with. He wasn't going to leave until he'd had his say, and probably not even then. He was as stubborn as she was proud. Finally, Ada dropped her arms, a small crease still between her brows. "All right, Mr. Luke," she said, her voice still a bit stiff. "But just the high parts, and no funny business." Luke's smile brightened, a genuine, warm grin that reached his eyes. "Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am. Just good, honest work." He set down the bag of nails and picked up a hammer, already eyeing the unfinished wall with a professional gaze. Ada watched him, a strange mix of annoyance and something akin to curiosity stirring within her. This was going to be interesting. The agreement, however reluctant, didn't mean instant harmony. Ada watched Luke with a wary eye as he picked up her hammer and tested its weight. He then began to climb the rough wooden frame of the barn wall, as nimble as a squirrel. He seemed to know exactly where to put his feet, finding handholds and footholds with ease. In moments, he was at the spot where Ada had been struggling. "All right," he called down, his voice surprisingly clear from above. "Pass me that boar, ma'am." Ada picked up a long plank of wood, heavy and awkward. She had to stretch to hand it up to him. As he took it, their fingers brushed. A small tingle, like a tiny electric shock, went through Ada. She quickly pulled her hand back. Luke balanced the board with one hand, pulling a nail from his generous bag with the other. "Hold it steady now," he instructed. "I know how to hold a board steady, Mr. Luke," Ada retorted, feeling a little flustered. "I've been building this barn for weeks." Asterisk thwack. Thwack. Asterisk Luke drove the nail in with quick, sure blows. He was fast, much faster than she had been. He moved to the next spot, his body bending and twisting in ways Ada simply couldn't. "You're using my hammer," Ada pointed out, a slight edge to her voice. Luke glanced down, a grin spreading across his face. "It's a good hammer. Works just fine up here." "Well, I'll need it back when you're done with the high parts," she said, hands on her hips. "Oh, I reckon I'll be done when the barn's done," he said with a wink. Ada rolled her eyes. He was testing her patience already. We agreed on the high parts only, she reminded him. And what's higher than the roof? He asked innocently, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She huffed. The roof is not just the high parts of the walls, Mr. Luke. That's a whole different job. Same difference, to my way of thinking, he said, hammering another nail. Gets the job done, don't it? Ada muttered something under her breath that sounded suspiciously like stubborn mule. Luke, however, seemed to have ears like a fox. Did you say something, ma'am? He called down, his eyes sparkling with amusement. I said, watch where you're putting that nail. Ada quickly changed her words, a blush creeping up her neck. She couldn't believe she was bickering with a stranger. But his easy-going, teasing manner was somehow chipping away at her carefully built defenses. He laughed, a rich, hearty sound that surprised her. It was the first time in a long time that she'd heard laughter near a barn. Don't you worry, ma'am. I hit what I aimed for. As the morning wore on, they fell into a strange rhythm. Ada would cut the boards, measure them, and hand them up. Luke would climb, position, and hammer. They bickered about the angle of a cut, the straightness of a beam, or the proper way to hold a nail. Ada would insist on doing things her way, explaining Thomas's methods. Luke would listen patiently, then offer a slightly different, often more efficient, suggestion. You're trying to build a barn, not a church steeple. Ada, he'd tease, mispronouncing her name just enough to annoy her. It's Ada, Mr. Luke, and this barn will be sturdy, she'd correct him, trying to keep a straight face. Despite her annoyance, a small smile kept trying to break through. Luke's jokes, his easy laughter, and his surprising skill made the hard work feel lighter. She even found herself laughing out loud when he almost dropped a hammer and caught it with his foot. The silence around the barn was slowly being replaced by the sounds of hammering, and something else, shared laughter. Days melted into weeks, each one marked by the growing height of the barn and the fading sharpness of Ada's initial resistance. The sun rose and set, painting the Kansas sky in hues of orange and purple, finding Ada and Luke still working, often long after the heat of the day had softened. Their rhythm of bickering slowly transformed into a comfortable dance. Ada, working on the lower walls and cutting the lumber to size, would pass boards up to Luke. He, nimble as always, would scale the rising structure, hammering with a speed and precision that still impressed her. Their conversations grew longer than simple instructions or teasing remarks. One afternoon, while Ada was carefully aligning a baseboard, Luke called down, "Where'd you learn all this, Ada? Most folks hire help for a job this big." Ada paused, tapping the board into place with her hammer. "Thomas and I," she began, her voice softer than usual. "We always planned to build this barn together. He taught me a lot about building, about the land." She looked up at Luke, who was perched high on a beam, listening intently. He was a good man. Luke nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Sounds like it. A good man to have such a sturdy wife." Ada felt a blush warm her cheeks, a feeling she hadn't known in a long time. "And you, Mr. Luke? What brings a man with a wagon full of nails to a lonely ranch in Kansas?" Luke chuckled. "Just Luke, please, Ada. My folks always call me Luke. And I'm not so lonely. Got a small spread, a few days ride north. Came down this way looking for some fresh grazing land for my cattle. Saw your barn from a distance and figure a woman tackling such a project might need a hand, even if she wouldn't admit it." He told her about his own small ranch, how he'd come west years ago from Ohio, seeking his fortune. He spoke of wrestling with stubborn cows, of long days under the sun, and of the quiet beauty of the prairie. Ada, in turn, found herself sharing stories of her childhood, of learning to ride horses almost before she could walk, and of her dreams for this ranch with Thomas. She spoke of the struggles of farming in Kansas, the unpredictable weather, and the hard-won joys of a good harvest. Luke listened with genuine interest, often asking questions that showed he was truly paying attention. He seemed to understand the deep connection she had to this land, to this barn. He didn't pity her or try to take over, but simply offered his strength where hers was lacking. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery colors, they sat on two overturned buckets, eating the simple supper Ada had prepared. "You know," Luke said, leaning back, "this barn's going to be a fine one. Strong as any I've seen." Ada smiled, a real, unburdened smile. "It is," she agreed, "and it's a lot taller than it would have been if I'd done it alone." She met his gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The barn was no longer just a project. It was theirs, built with shared effort and a growing understanding. The silence between them now felt comfortable, not lonely. As the barn grew taller, so did a new feeling within Ada. It was a warmth, a lightness she hadn't felt since before Thomas passed. Luke had a way of making her laugh, truly laugh, until her sides ached. He'd tell funny stories about his cattle, like the time a calf tried to milk his hat, or sing off-key songs while he hammered, his voice surprisingly tuneful even when it was a little flat. Ada found herself humming along, something she hadn't done in ages. He was so kind, too. One blistering afternoon, when Ada was struggling to lift a particularly heavy beam, Luke had quietly come down from his perch. "Here," he'd said, not making a big fuss, and together they lifted it into place. He never made her feel weak, only capable, and he always seemed to know when she needed a hand without her having to ask. Ada noticed the small things. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, how he always made sure she had enough water, or how he'd pick a wild daisy and tuck it behind her ear when she wasn't looking. She'd pretend to be annoyed, but a genuine smile would spread across her face every time. One morning, while Ada was cutting a long board, her saw got stuck. She tugged and pulled, but it wouldn't budge. Luke climbed down, his movements quick and easy. He didn't just grab the saw. Instead, he knelt beside her, his hand gently covering hers on the saw handle. "Try it this way," he murmured, guiding her hand with his. The saw moved smoothly through the wood. His touch was warm and steady, and Ada felt a jolt like she'd touched a live wire. She looked up, and his gaze met hers. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. His eyes, a warm hazel color, held a kindness she found herself leaning into. Luke, for his part, was completely charmed by Ada. Her strength was clear, not just in her muscles, but in her spirit. She was fiercely independent, proud, and had a sharp wit that kept him on his toes. He loved the way her eyes would flash when she was annoyed, and how quickly her irritation could turn into a genuine smile. He admired her grit, her determination to build this barn, a testament to her love for her late husband and her own resilience. He saw the sadness that still lingered in her eyes, but also the vibrant life that was slowly returning. He found himself looking forward to each sunrise, eager to get back to the barn, to the rhythmic sounds of hammering and the easy banter they now shared. He'd catch himself watching her as she worked, her brow furrowed in concentration, her dark hair often escaping its braid to frame her face. She was beautiful, he realized, not in a delicate way, but in the strong, enduring way of the Kansas prairie itself. The barn wasn't just being built with wood and nails anymore. It was being built with shared laughter, unspoken understanding, and a growing warmth between them that felt as real and as sturdy as the timbers they were raising. Ada found herself thinking about Luke even when he wasn't around, wondering if he was thinking of her too. A quiet, hopeful spark had definitely been lit. The days had turned into weeks, then months, and now the barn stood almost complete. It was a magnificent sight, rising proudly from the prairie. Its sturdy wooden walls, the strong beams of its frame, and the newly laid roof shingles all spoke of hard work and careful planning. What had once been a lonely dream for Ada was now a solid reality, a testament to her unwavering will and to the unexpected help of a short, wiry rancher named Luke. From the outside, the barn looked like it had always been there, a natural part of the Kansas landscape. Inside, the air smelled of fresh-cut wood and sunshine, a comforting scent. The stalls were built, the hayloft was ready, and the big double doors were hung, waiting for their final coat of paint. Ada and Luke stood side by side, looking at their handiwork. Ada felt a deep sense of accomplishment, a pride that swelled in her chest. This barn was more than just a building. It was a symbol of hope, of moving forward. And standing next to Luke, sharing in that pride, made it even sweeter. "Well, Ada," Luke said, his voice soft, "looks like we nearly did it." He nudged her gently with his elbow, a familiar gesture now. Ada smiled, a wide, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "We did, Luke. We really did." She looked up at the high rafters, where Luke had spent so many hours, his hammer ringing out across the fields. "It's stronger than I ever imagined." They had only a few more things to do. The weather vane needed to be set atop the highest peak, a small window needed its glass, and the barn doors needed their final latch. Small jobs compared to the huge task they had already completed, but important ones. Ada thought back to the first day Luke arrived, with his stubborn smile and his bag of nails. She remembered her irritation, her fierce desire to do it all alone. How foolish that felt now. Luke hadn't just helped her build a barn. He had helped her rebuild a part of herself, a part she thought was lost forever. He had brought laughter back into her life, and a quiet companionship that felt as natural as breathing. Luke, too, felt a swell of pride. He had come to offer a temporary hand, a simple act of neighborly kindness. But he had found something more. He had found Ada, with her strong hands and even stronger heart. He admired her courage, her spirit, and the way she held herself with such grace, even when covered in sawdust and sweat. Building this barn with her had been the most rewarding work he'd ever done. He watched her now, her eyes shining as she gazed at the barn. He saw the joy, but also a hint of something else, something tender and new. He wanted to reach out, to take her hand, but he held back. Not yet. There was still a little bit of work left. And then, maybe then, he could tell her what was truly in his heart. Just the weather vane and that window, then, Ada said, turning to him, her gaze lingering on his face. "And the latch for the doors. Then it'll be ready for its first occupants." Luke agreed, his voice a little deeper than usual. "And maybe its first dance." He winked, and Ada felt a flutter in her chest. A dance? In the barn? The idea was silly and wonderful. The easy calm of the afternoon was suddenly broken by a shift in the wind. A cool gust swept across the prairie, rustling the tall grass and making Ada shiver. She looked up. The sky, which had been a clear, brilliant blue all morning, was now darkening rapidly to the west. Great bruised purple clouds rolled in, heavy and fast, like an angry sea. The air grew thick and still, buzzing with a strange energy. "Looks like a Kansas gully washer is heading our way," Luke said, his voice serious. He pointed to the distant horizon, where streaks of lightning flickered silently. "We need to get that weather vane up and that window in and those doors latched quick as we can." Ada's heart thumped a little faster. A big storm could undo weeks of hard work if the barn wasn't properly closed up. "You get the weather vane, Luke," she yelled over the rising wind, already grabbing the small, intricate rooster-shaped vane they had ready. "I'll handle the window and the doors." They moved with a sudden urgency, their comfortable rhythm turning into a focused race against the sky. Luke, with his usual agility, was already scaling the side of the barn, carrying the weather vane like a flag. He moved quickly, his small frame sure-footed on the high beams. Ada watched him for a second, a flicker of worry mixed with admiration. The wind was picking up, making his task even harder. Meanwhile, Ada hurried to the open window frame. The glass was delicate, and she had to work carefully, despite the rush. Her fingers, usually steady, fumbled a little as she set the pane into its frame, securing it with tiny wooden strips and small nails. The first few drops of rain, fat and cold, splattered on her arms. "Almost got it," she called out, though the wind snatched her words away. Luke was wrestling with the weather vane at the very peak of the roof. He hammered the base in a place with strong, swift blows, making sure it was firmly seated. The rooster spun wildly in the wind, a bright spot against the dark sky. Just as he finished, a loud clap of thunder boomed overhead, making the ground tremble. Ada flinched, then quickly ran to the big double doors. They were already hung, but they needed a strong latch to keep them closed against the coming storm. She grabbed the heavy iron bar, fitting it into its slots. The wood was slick with rain now, and her hand were cold. She pushed the final pin into place, securing the doors just as another crack of thunder split the air, much closer this time. Luke slid down the last beam, landing lightly on the ground beside her just as the heavens opened. Rain didn't just fall, it poured, a solid sheet of water that instantly turned the dry earth into mud. The wind howled, whipping Ada's hair around her face. They were soaked in seconds, rainwater plastering their clothes to their bodies. They looked at each other, their faces streaked with rain and dirt, but their eyes shining with relief and triumph. The barn stood strong and tall, its doors latched, its windows closed, its weather vanes spinning bravely in the gale. It was finished, just in time. Soaked to the bone and breathless from their race against the storm, Ada and Luke stumbled through the newly latched barn doors. Inside, it was a world away from the wild fury outside. The air was dry and smelled sweetly of fresh-cut pine. The deep drumming of the rain on the sturdy new roof filled the space, a comforting, rhythmic sound. Little light came through the closed doors and windows, making the inside dim and cozy, lit mostly by the soft glow of a lantern Ada had lit earlier. They stood for a moment, dripping puddles at their feet, simply looking at each other. Ada's hair, usually neatly braided, was now plastered to her face, and her clothes clung to her. Luke's hat was gone, and his usually neat mustache was slick with water. But in their eyes was a shared sparkle, a joy that chased away the last shadows of the storm. "We did it," Ada whispered, her voice filled with wonder. She looked around the barn, at the clean stalls, the high hayloft, and the solid walls. It was perfect, more than perfect. Luke grinned, a wide, happy grin that made his eyes shine. "We surely did, Ada." He stepped closer, his boots squishing softly in the mud they tracked in. The rain outside grew louder, a steady, powerful drumming that enveloped them. Then, Luke did something Ada didn't expect. He reached out, gently taking her wet, calloused hand in his. His touch sent a warm shiver through her, quite different from the cold of the rain. "Remember what I said earlier?" he asked, his voice soft, almost lost in the sound of the storm. "About the first dance?" Ada's heart fluttered like a bird. She looked into his hazel eyes, which held such kindness and a playful spark. "I remember," she breathed. Without another word, Luke pulled her gently towards him. He didn't know fancy steps, and Ada hadn't danced in years, not since Thomas. But it didn't matter. They swayed slowly, in the middle of their new barn, to the rhythm of the rain. Their movements were simple, a quiet shuffle, a soft turn, but the feeling was immense. Ada rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. She felt safe, happy, and truly, wonderfully alive. The grief that had been a constant companion for so long had finally, truly, begun to lift. Luke's arm around her waist felt like a promise, a gentle strength that she hadn't known she needed. They danced on, not speaking, just moving together as the Kansas rain poured down, washing the world clean outside their sturdy, beautiful barn. It was a new beginning, marked not by sadness, but by laughter, hard work, and the quiet, hopeful dance of two stubborn hearts.